Turn to page 366. This little chart is very important today.
What color is it?
This is a green apple. Green.
That's
We
pretty
have
awesome.
changed today.
What?
We have changed today.
No. So this little index chart thing, majigger, is called the Consumer Price Index, otherwise known as CPI. So this measures how prices of goods and services have kind of fluctuated or basically risen from the beginning of when they started to kind of tally this. And from the beginning is called the base period. The base period is where you're going to make comparisons to for this entire section. Now, in this particular case, the CPI's base period is 1982 through 1984. So if you look on that chart, it's the very top one. And notice that everything is based off of 100. Okay? Now, the only one that doesn't have it, or there's two actually, is recreation and education and communication. Notice they didn't start till 1994. So their base period would be 1994. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so this would be your starting point. All the other numbers are called index numbers, which is the single number in each one. And you're basically thinking about comparing that number to 100. Again, as we said. So just think about 100 all the time in the assignment and when you have to do this on the quiz and the test. All right, so to use the CPI, you would look at a year in a certain category. All right, so you just go through it and you look at it. Let's all look at the same one. Let's go to apparel in 1996. Okay, so in 1996, apparel was 130.3. So what does that mean? What's that number mean?
Above 100, so it's increased.
Yeah, so it's increased that amount, 30.6 basically, or $30, $30, or yeah, 30.6 is how much it's over the baseline. So if you would consider the baseline as basically being zero, it went up 30.6 cents, or 30, right. So notice then in apparel at least, they have kind of fought their way back down, but basically all the other ones have done what? Gone up. Look at medical care. In 1982-84, again, it starts at 100, and look where it was in 2007. 357.7. Right? That's unbelievable, and that's not taking into effect the last what? That was 2007. We're in 2022 now. Okay, so we got another 15 years. All right? So, each one of those numbers then is basically saying that it went up that amount. So 62, or in our case, we said apparel, it went up 30.3% from our baseline. Okay, so all of the numbers pretty much went up because of that.
Good inflation we got
Right, so it's all about inflation. So another way of thinking about this is, as you can see up here, I did food in 1998, and it was 162.7 in the chart. So basically what that is saying again is, back in 1982 to 84, what you paid $100 worth of for food, you're basically paying $162.70 in 1998. So that's a big difference, right? Okay. So then, obviously, it's the chain of events. If we have to pay that, then what else has to get raised? Well, the wages, taxes, the trucking industry, because of fuel and that kind of thing, and getting it there. If the company's going to charge more, then they're going to charge more on the back end of it too. So everything gets tied in together. Okay? So obviously we're talking about what Dylan kind of said, inflation, right? Not only for consumers, but businesses, our organizations, the government, everybody goes through it, right? And, sometimes inflation's a good thing, right? Sometimes it's a horrible thing. So you got to think about you know, when we were in the Depression, it was a good thing for World War One, because why?
Because then we got more economic, I don't know.
Yeah.
Increased it,
Right, but
boosted our economy.
we boosted our economy because we all of a sudden got jobs for people that were sitting at home, right? So even though it was, you know, putting together guns or whatever it happened to be, that increased our overall economic viability, okay? So the next thing that we want to look at is how to figure out the rate of inflation. You always hear about what's the rate of inflation. Well, you're going to figure this out by doing whatever you want to do it to by the category in the book. So in that little green chart again, you're going to look at whatever they ask you to do. But this is, if you're writing things down, this is probably what you want to write down. The year they ask you for, you're going to go 1 year back. Okay, so if they ask you to do this, and here, they did, I believe, example C,
1999.
okay, 1999.
You're gonna do 1998.
Okay, so find their rate of inflation for 1999. Now, it doesn't talk about any specific category, right? So if you're going to do this and they don't tell you a category, you're always going to use the all items column, the very first column. Okay, so in 1999, I'm going to look at the two numbers that they gave me, right? Or, sorry, they give me one number, but I have to go back to the number before that. So I'm going to take 163 and I'm going to take 166.6. And I'm going to subtract those two numbers. Okay? From there then, I'm going to take that and divide it. And I'm always going to go back, again, make sure you look here. And you're always going to use the earlier year. So essentially, in most cases, or it's going to be the smaller number. If you can't remember which one to use, it's always going to be the smaller one. So you subtract the two, take that answer and divide it from the earlier year, or in this case, the smaller year again. So we would take 163 minus 160.5, which is easy math, right? So you take 2.5 and divide it by 163, and we get what? Whatever you
You
punch
take
that.
1998 minus 1997?
You said 99 minus 1998.
Right. They asked us to find 1999.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take 166. Oh, did I do that wrong too?
Yeah.
You're right. Sorry. 166.6 minus 163. So we'd get what? 3.6 divided by 163, and we get a grand total of what?
2.2%.
2.2%. So that one wasn't too bad, right? Inflation of 2.2%. Okay. Obviously, the bigger number differential, or the bigger differential between the two numbers, the higher the inflation rate does. But again, now, notice in then, like in D, they ask you to find the inflation of medical care. So you can do it for each individual category, or you can do it for the whole chart. And again, the whole chart is that first column with all items. Okay? Any questions there? So we're trying to find the inflation rate. Then they talk about the purchase power of the dollar. So obviously, is the dollar worth the same amount that it was back in the days? Absolutely not, right? So another way of thinking about this is when you think about 1982 through 1984 as the base period, that means the dollar was $1. So what you were paying $1 for, that's what you were getting, all right? Now, if you did this in 1998, okay, and looked at it in the chart, they're showing you that it was 100 and my numbers don't match up, it looks like. 1998, there's not a 65, is there? So I must have looked.
62.
I must have looked at the chart wrong or something. So basically what they're saying for this one is, if you notice, you're just going to compare the number that's there as being $1 to the number that's there over $1 tells you how much it is as just cents. So essentially, when they say 159.1, then it's 59.1 instead of $1. Okay? So you can still see it, it wasn't the same number. Alright? So to find the purchasing power of your dollar, you're going to divide the CPI by the CPI you are comparing it to. And then you would get your answer. So in this case right here, again, I don't see the number that I used. So it must have been a specific category. And I just didn't have it written down there. But we'll go through an example of that here in just a second. Okay? Well, we can do that one. So turn the page and we'll go to those ones. Letter E. Use the CPI table to find the purchasing power of the dollar in 2007 to the nearest tenth of a cent. So if we're going to do the purchasing power of the dollar in this one, we're going to take 100 and divide it by the purchasing power of the dollar in 2007. So go back to the all items column in 2007 and you use 207.3. So you're going to take 100 divided by 207.3 and then turn that into cents.
48 cents.
48 cents, right? So you get 0.4823, right? And then obviously you want to turn it into, so what does this mean? This means that basically the dollar was worth only 48 cents in 2007. Now it's probably even less, right? So in F, use the CPI to find how much a $1997 was worth compared to 1982-84. So essentially it's the same thing, but in 1997 we would have had what? 160.5. So I'm going to take 100 divided by 160.5. So they could either say in 1982-84 or say by the base period or just say find the purchasing power of the dollar. Those all mean the same thing. But I just take 100 and divide by the number in the chart.
Yes, sir.
Okay? Then obviously the last thing they talk about is the unemployment rate. And again now, this is one of those things that's kind of thrown around a lot. And you can kind of manipulate this number a little bit by how you kind of throw it out to the public. You know what I mean? So a lot of politicians will play with this number, not really showing all the true facts. And so you need to know what they're talking about with the unemployment rate. Obviously, if you think about it in a general sense, they're talking about the percentage of the total labor force that's not working. But what's truly the labor force, right? Labor force they describe as all people who are willing to work and who have a job or are looking for a job. So even the people that are looking for a job are considered a part of the labor force. Okay? What's frustrating to me, I guess, is right now there's a lot of jobs out there, or there seems to be, especially maybe not as much now as maybe 2 months ago, but then there was a lot of people that weren't working. You know, so that's kind of frustrating for people that were working. But basically, you know, like I said, this is a number that was thrown out there, and obviously during the pandemic, it was a lot different than what it was before and what it was probably now, right? Before the pandemic, we were actually doing really well, especially in like Iowa. But then obviously everybody kind of didn't go to work for a while there. And then now it's getting harder for some of those people to get back into the jobs, or at least the job mode. I think there's enough jobs out there, there's just some of those people aren't going back to lazy, right? Okay, so if you turn the page, on 369, there's another, can I call this green?
That's
Yes,
green.
it's
It's
green.
Thank you. A green apple chart, thank you. Yeah. In April 2008, unemployment rates by age, sex, and race. So obviously, our biggest unemployment rate was what? You guys, right? You're too busy playing video games. Okay? And then obviously, you can do whatever you want with that chart, meaning you can compare people, you can compare sections, you compare whatever you want, all right? We didn't go and talk about letter A and letter B, so go back to letter A and letter B. So this is basically, we skipped over how to actually do the CPI. So in letter A, it says, use the CPI table. By what percent did the CPI for apparel increase from the base period to 1994? So from the base period to 1994, obviously we can see the math, 100 and 130.5. I subtract those two, and that's my answer. Okay, so it's just 30.5%. So those are really easy. That's kind of why we skipped over. And then obviously, they tell you to do it in 2007. So again, you can do it to each individual section or column, or if they don't say anything, then you always do the all items column. Okay? In letter B, of all the categories whose base period is 82 through 84, which one showed the greatest percentage increase to 2007? Obviously, it was what? Medical care, again, we kind of talked about that. And what percent of increase did they show already in 2007?
257.
So it's always subtracting it by 100. So already they were showing 257. I wonder what it is now, right?
500 at least.
Right. Okay. So, questions with any of this? Everybody okay with all the vocabulary? It's kind of disheartening to me to see the purchase power of the dollar being that low, right? But again, what do? You just go to work and watch your rates stay the same and everything else go up. Right?
You know the Arizona cans, the drink, they've been 98 cents for the past 20 years.
Well, you're still 98 cents.
Yeah.
I go to the bathroom.
They must be using garbage to
Or they're getting mine this year, so.
They're using garbage to make their can? Oh, I see, like recycled stuff?
make them.
I
Yeah.
think that was all fake.
I'm trying to move it. Is that good?
Get your own.
I don't know, can you see it?
There.
Oh, Carson's still in. Can you see my head?